This is a topic that many of us have already pulled ourselves through, being part of the mature audience. I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing each of these women, what they've managed in terms of their life-work balance. And I recommend that as you're listening, to try and gather some information, learn from the people around you in terms of how we've gone through the hardship of getting to our life-work balance. Don't be misled that we're never done with the struggles of life-work balance. So call on your peers and listen to these women and see what you can gain from them and grow from that. Because we all bring something different in terms of our work as well as our family needs. I'll start with Ruth. Ruth, I'm trying really hard to do the Spanish version here. Amarisha, there's the Spanish one. Joined ConocoPhillips in June as Manager of Strategic Spending Management, bringing more than 16 years of industry experience to the company. Ruth is a professional engineer and holds a Master's of Engineering and Project Management from the University of Calgary. She also holds a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Cima, Buenos Aires, Argentina. They got really good wine. And a bachelor's degree in process engineering. Ruth likes to travel, read, and spend time with her family and friends. And then there's Rochelle Outram at the end. She is a category manager. Oh, really quickly. Ruth is the manager of strategic spend management, supply chain management, ConocoPhillips. And Rochelle is category manager, electric power, ConocoPhillips Canada. Rochelle is the electrical power category manager for ConocoPhillips Canada. She has been with the company for 12 years, starting her career as a marketing analyst with Canadian Hunter in 2001. She earned her undergraduate of social science in economics and political science from the University of Calgary. She resides in Calgary with her husband Richard and son Nolan. She likes to volunteer at her son's school, sports, and traveling, whether it's in Europe or the mountains. And they added that she likes to eat and drink, but maybe not for a little while. And then I'd like to welcome Sue. She's the CEO of YWCA of Calgary. Sue has an extensive background in communications and marketing and has held senior level positions with both nonprofits and corporations prior to joining the YWCA of Calgary in December 2010, including Executive Director of the Calgary Stampede Foundation, VP Marketing and Communications for Image Canada, Director of Communication and External Affairs of TransAlta Corporation, and Manager of Community Investment at Canadian Airlines International. Sue served on the Joint Table of Awareness for the Government of Canada's Voluntary Sector Initiative and is currently on the board of the Calgary Chamber of Voluntary Organizations and calgaryhelps.org. Her recent voluntary sector experience includes cabinet member for the Calgary's United Way campaign, governor for Education Matters, Calgary's Public Education Trust, executive committee of the 2008 Governor General's Leadership Conference, and a member of the Community Engagement and Awareness Committee at Calgary's Poverty Reduction Coalition. She's going to have a lot to tell you. So we'll start off with Ruth, and then we'll go with Rochelle and Sue, and they'll give you their story and their experience, and then from there I'll come back up and we will work on a question and answer period. Thank you, ladies.
I thought this was going to be tall for me. It's kind of high. So thank you for having me here. I'm very glad to be here talking about this topic. I'm Ruth Amarilla, or Amarisha, depending on which language we say it. I'm originally from Argentina. And that is why you may perceive I have a slight accent. If you don't perceive it, So when I was asked to talk about work-life balance, the first thing I remember was that my friends used to tell me some time ago that I didn't have a life. I said, how is that? What are you talking about? I do have a life. And this happened because my husband and I came to Canada 9 years ago. And we were both engineers in Argentina. I had my MBA also in Argentina. And when we came here, of course, it's a different country. It is a different system. So we decided that we wanted to go back to school and study again. So I decided to go ahead and do my Master's of Engineering at the University of Calgary. And he decided he wanted to pursue his MBA. But not only that, at that time, he also wanted to do the CPP. It was a CPP at that time. So we started to work on that. And of course, we were working all day. And after that, we were going to school. And when we had some time, of course, we used to read or study, right? That is what you do when you have to pass exams. So of course, our friends said, well, guys, you don't have time to go skiing, you don't have time to go hiking, you don't have a life. And we were enjoying at that time what we were doing, right? So we were enjoying work, we were enjoying going to school, we made a lot of friends at school, and we learned a lot. And the dynamic was so different that we really, really enjoyed it. So that was our life. And we did have our balance. So we're going to talk about that today. What is work-life balance? Because work-life balance means different things for different people, and it can mean different things for the same person at different moments in our lives. So we're going to talk a little about that. We are going to start with what is work-life balance, and then we are going to start talking about why we want work-life balance. Some benefits of work-life balance, we all know about them, and finally some tips for getting to a life that is balanced. And we're going to try to answer this question, is it a fact or is it fiction? Do you think that we can separate work and life? No, right? Work is part of our life. When we have a great day at work, we go back to our house and we feel energized, we feel happy. If we didn't have a very good day at work, how does that feel? We get home and we are tired. We really don't want to do anything else. We want to go to bed or maybe have a glass of wine and stop the day there, please. Right? So work is affecting our personal lives. The same way, what happens if we have, for example, our husbands or wives or a loved one that is sick at home, and we go to work, most likely we are going to be distracted. We are not going to be focused in the work in the way we would be any other day. And that happens because we have a personal life that is affecting work now, right? So they are completely interrelated. But the thing here is that even when we can think about personal events and professional events, and we can have separate events in these areas, we only have one life. We don't have two lives, one work life and one personal life, right? So that is why we need to get the balance, because we need to have a life that is really balanced so that we are happy and we can be happy at work and we can be happy out of work. These are some definitions that I found when I was looking for this. I thought it was interesting to think about balance meaning equilibrium, but the second one was really important also, that creates a personal life experience of health and happiness. And at the end, happiness is what we all want, right? We all want to get there. And balance is relative, and it is different for each of us. So what one person may understand as balance may not be the same thing that other person understands. In my first example, when I was telling you, my friends were saying, hey, you can go hiking, you can go skiing. But I was enjoying anyways, right? I was enjoying what I was doing at that time. I was going to have time to go skiing, and I was going to have time to go and do something else. So what I really wanted at that time was to do that. And somebody else may understand something different. So this is a very important point. It is relative, and it is different for everybody. And the last 2 points are also very important, because we need to create that balance from our values and from our beliefs. And in order to get there, we need to understand which our beliefs and values are and get them really clear. Sometimes we think that we got there. Of course, we know which our values are, right? But getting to define them sometimes is a little more difficult. getting to the priorities sometimes is a little more difficult. And even more difficult is going one step after that to aligning our behaviors to get to those values and beliefs. And the final point is about work-life balance as a process. Work-life balance is not a destination, it is a journey. So it doesn't finish. And we will see this later in the presentation. It doesn't have an end. It's there with us all our lives. So why do we want balance? Why do you think we want balance? Basically, there are two things that, in my opinion, are really, really important. One is to have a satisfying life. We all want to have a satisfying life. We want to have an experience of life that is good, and we want to be happy, as mentioned before. But what does that mean? Because sometimes we think that satisfaction is when we have everything we want. But sometimes we have everything we want and we are not satisfied. So the basis of satisfaction is in our structure of values. It is in our set of priorities. And getting to align those set of priorities and those values to our behaviors. How are we going to get there? We are going to get to that a little later. And the second point, it's about to be the better version of ourselves, to work on that so that we can become the better version of ourselves. And this is about us, and it's different again for each of us. So life will be about saying yes to those things that are going to help us to become the better version of ourselves, and saying no to those things that don't. The good thing about everything I said is that who do you think is responsible for doing that? So it's up to us. We have the power to do that. And that is, I think it's awesome. It's something that we can do ourselves. We are empowered to do that. So these are some of the benefits of work-life balance. As mentioned before, achieving work-life balance is not easy. It requires time, it requires effort, but what we need to be convinced about is that it is worth it. And it is. You can see here that we split at work and in life, but actually, we can relate them very much. So when we say, for example, at work, feeling more rested and energized, most likely that will have in our lives too, right? So that will apply to both. Another benefit is that we are going to work more productively. We are going to get more accomplished. And because of that, we are going to have greater success in our careers. And of course, we are going to have more fulfillment from work. In our lives, we are going to improve relationship with family and friends. And again, this applies to work too, because we are going to have also an improved relationship with our coworkers. We are going to have better physical and mental health. I'm making choices about priorities instead of sacrifices. And of course, we all want a little more of leisure time. Sometimes we don't have enough. And if we do things more efficiently, then we can get there. And we can have that time that we are wanting. So how are we going to get there? These are some tips. They are not all of them. Like we can think about a lot of different things. But I think some of these points are very, very important because if we don't have them, it's really difficult to get there. The first one I really like, create an inspiring vision for your life. When we have an inspiring vision for our lives, then it is much easier to embrace change. And it is also much easier to adapt our behaviors to get there. The second one is about establishing priorities and making sure that they are aligned with our personal values. And here, one important thing is that we need to make sure that we clearly identify and understand those priorities. what is more important for us right now? Maybe it's not the thing that, maybe it's not the same thing that was more important for us 10 years ago. Maybe things changed. Maybe it is not even the same thing that was important for us 2 months ago. Things changed. They changed because of our objectives, they changed because of our families, and there are a lot of factors in our lives, and things may change. The third one is about setting inspiring goals. Once we have our vision, once we have our priorities, then we are ready to set goals. When we set goals, it's good to do it in short steps instead of long steps. Because when we do it in short steps, they are more manageable, and also we can reward ourselves when we achieve them. So it is much easier to keep track, and it is much more easy to implement the change. The fourth one, strive for excellence. No matter what you do, no matter where you are. Because at the end, you know what? We all want to do the right thing. And when we do it right, we are happy. So we are happier. No, it doesn't matter what you are doing. And the fifth one is very related to this one. Love what you do. We talk about, and we talk a lot about this, doing what you love. So what would you love to do? What do you really want to do right now? Depending on your priorities, on your feelings, on your objectives. But as important as that is, it's very important to love what you are doing right now. You will do it better, and that will make you happier. And you will get where you want to get faster too, right? The sixth one is about managing your time and energy, and I added there increase and manage, because when we think about time management, we think about our schedule and how we are going to do with all these things that I have to do, and the day is not long enough. But what about energy? How much energy do we have to go through the day? And to assign that energy to the different things that we have to do and that we want to do. So in this one, for example, if we think about energy, we can think, okay, I'm going to increase my energy by having a healthier life, eating better, we can change the diet, we can think about working out, which are all very important things. So that is a really good step to start, right? We have to think also on the following 3 steps there. Keeping focus. Keeping focus is part of increasing your energy. That is mental energy. If you keep focus, then you are going to try to finish what you start. You are going to try to be more efficient on what you are doing. So that is why I included that picture at the bottom, because I thought it was really funny that that happens to all of us. Sometimes you are thinking about something else, and I have to do this, and I didn't do it, or I should be doing that. The advice would be, if you are with family enjoying, enjoy. If you are at work, work. And if you decide to go to the gym to work out, work out. Like, whatever you decide to do, focus on that. Keep focus. That will help you. Combat negative thoughts and replace them with positive ones. I think that one is very self-explanatory. And finally, laugh. Take the time to laugh. Laugh is good for us, for each of us, when we do it, and it's also contagious, right? So it's a win-win there. Avoid procrastination. This is so common, right? We have something that we don't like to do, that we don't want to do, and we leave it for tomorrow, right? Because anyways, we can do it tomorrow. But then guess what? Then we're going to have to do it tomorrow, adding it to all the other things we have to do tomorrow, right? So we have to think about that, because it increases our anxiety. It is not healthy. So try to avoid that. I think this is something that I should be saying even looking at myself in the mirror, right? Because it's something that it's difficult to get there. It's very common that we do that. Share responsibilities. try to have open communication. Try to understand what the expectations of the other parties are. It can be family, it can be your husband, it can be your wife, it can be a friend, it can be a coworker. How can you share responsibilities? And getting beyond that, maybe it's time also to delegate responsibilities. Express appreciation. Sometimes we underestimate how important that is, how important and powerful. It has such a strong positive effect in all of us. All of us like that. And the interesting thing is that it is as nice to do it than, like, it's the same thing if somebody expresses appreciation for you, right? So it's good both ways. It does work. Seek and accept help from others. It can be family, it can be friends, it can be somebody else. We all need help sometimes, and it's good to seek that help when we really need it. And Rochelle is going to talk a little more about that later. Simplify. Try to get rid of all those things that are complicated in your life and don't get you anywhere, right? This is complicated. Why would we do it? Okay, this is why we need to do it. But there are other things that, why are we doing this? Oh, I don't know. Okay, so maybe it's time to stop that, right? Maintain healthy practices. I'm sure we are going to listen a little more about that. And believe in yourself. This is another very, very powerful one. Learn to accept change, and not only to accept it, but sometimes we need to initiate change. And finally, reassess when needed. We mentioned that we are always changing our priorities. Sometimes they are there for a while, but sometimes they do change. So we need to be reassessing this all the time. So we are going to try to answer the question. First, we are going to have a short summary. Is this then fact or fiction? Well, we mentioned that work-life balance is not about having it all. It is about setting priorities. And we also mentioned that it is different for different people. And we mentioned that values are very important to be understood, clearly understood. And from there, if we identify the outcome we are setting, then we can drive our behaviors to those outcomes. So it depends on us, right? Who is going to lead those behaviors? Who is going to do that analysis? The question would be, okay, it is up to us, but how can we do it? Where do we start? So I'm a process person, and I always like to see things as in boxes, you know? It's my way of thinking. So I thought it was interesting to show all the elements that can make a work-life balance happen. We talked about setting priorities. And priorities are going to be set once we understand our values and our beliefs. So we have a basement, right? Our values and beliefs, and then we have our priority setting. That will be our basement. Once we do that, the next step will be to have a strategy. So how are we going to do that? Well, we already understood our priorities, so now we know what the outcome we want is. What is the outcome we desire? Once we know our outcome, then we will need to find and identify which are the behaviors that will lead us to those outcomes. And once we have the behaviors, then we will have to build a system that will support those behaviors. So in summary, the elements of that strategy would be behaviors and building a system. When we think about building a system, we can think about sharing responsibilities, we can think about making a change that we really need. So we will need to think about a system that is really supporting those behaviors, because if the system is not supporting those behaviors, we are not going to get to that set of priorities we are talking about. The third element is discipline. So now we have our priorities, now we have our system that we built, and now we have to implement it. So in order to do that, we require discipline. And discipline will be an enabler to get there. If we don't have discipline, we are not going to get there. To give you an example, you go to the gym, or you decide to go to the gym, and you decide to follow a routine. But it seems that you are very tired one day because you have been working so hard that day. And it's the end of the day, and you get really, really tired. And you say, well, you know what, I'm tired today, so maybe I won't go to the gym. But you make that extra effort. And you say, no, I decided to go, so I'm going to go. Most likely the following day, you feel really happy because you did it. You made it. What happened if you decide the other option, if you go for not going to the gym and going to your house and getting that glass of wine you wanted and relaxing? And I can't answer that because that is different for each of us. Maybe you feel happy. Maybe you feel guilty. Maybe you feel sad. That depends, right? We are different. But the important thing then is, and here you go, there are the priorities. What is important for you? How are you going to set those priorities? And what will make you happy? What will make you satisfied in the long run? Not only today, but in the long run. And of course, once you decide that, then you need that discipline we are talking about. And finally, self-awareness. We mentioned that we are changing all the time. Our context is changing all the time. And we will need to understand ourselves and how our behaviors are impacting our families, our coworkers, our friends, our life, and understand if we need to reassess or if we are going to stay where we are, keeping doing what we are doing and following the model we built. So it seems complicated, but I thought it was a good way of putting it so that there are some elements that are really, really necessary in order to get there. If we don't have those elements, then we are not going to get there. So, is it easy? It doesn't seem easy. Well, no. Life balance, having a balanced life is not easy, but it is worth it. And if we want to answer if it is a fact or if it is a fiction, then we think about, okay, but we have a process, and we can make it. And it depends on me, right? So, of course, it can be a fact. We can say that it is a fact because we have to make it a fact. So it is up to us. And it can be a fact, definitely. It is possible, but we can make it more than possible. Beyond that, we can make it a fact. And that's everything. I will leave Rochelle.
I was kind of hoping this podium would be bigger so that you wouldn't see as much of me. This is actually checking off one of my goals at work because I'm not a public speaker. So this is one of my derailers, is learning how to public speak better. So being here kind of ticks that box for me today. So thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you. So, as I was introduced, my name is Rochelle Outram. I'm the category manager for electrical power for ConocoPhillips, and I really appreciate you guys having us here today. This is a really great opportunity. So I'm going to let you ooh at this picture for a second. This little person is my work-life balance. So, when I'm not in the office, I go by the name of Mummy to this little boy, Nolan, who is 5 years old and an amazing little person. And as you can see by the empty box, I'm going to have another. That one's coming in August. So, in my brief summary, I'd like to continue with Ruth's topic and present work-life balance. Is it fact or fiction? In my case, I believe that it's quite possible and it is a fact. going to give you guys a second to read this. Hopefully you can all see it. I thought it was quite appropriate. And many of us really would see this as more of a reality than fiction. And if I was sitting in one of those chairs, probably the poofy-haired one in the middle there, my third choice would probably be family, but under the circumstances lately, it's sleep, to the dismay of my 5-year-old son. So this pyramid defining work-life balance was introduced to me when I started my career in oil and gas in 2000 with Canadian Hunter. The management of Canadian Hunter were strong believers in the balance of the pyramid of work, community, and family. And they weren't just believers in it, they didn't just put it in the lobby or on a newsletter. They proved to us by showing it in their own lives. They were active in the community. They were active at work, not just telling us what we had to do and not do. They came to us and talked to us about our families and our priorities and understood where we stood in our lives, and they wanted to be a part of that. And they understood that being a part of our lives and making us feel important, that they would see better results out of us, and understanding where we were at within our careers, within our family, within the community, it made for a better employee. And they really understood it, they lived it, they spoke it. So I think I started work-life balance within the industry with one of the best companies. And they understood that balance could not be achieved if one of these 3 triangles was sacrificed. So if your family was sacrificed because you were all day at work and you didn't ever see them, obviously, like Ruth said, you were going to bring it home, right? You were going to bring home those troubles to your family. And then those troubles with your family were going to come home, or were going to go to work with you the next day. Now, when I started with Canadian Hunter, I wasn't married, I didn't have children, and my daily schedule was not planned out to the minute like it is now. And I had plenty of opportunities to make this kind of balance a reality. As employees, we were fortunate to get to volunteer a lot during the day, actually. We were given a certain amount of time that we could go and volunteer with some of the organizations that they sponsored. A couple of those organizations were, for example, Calgary Drop-In Center and Habitat for Humanity. If you ever get an opportunity to volunteer with either of these organizations, take it. It truly is humbling and a rewarding experience. Sorry. So, my work-life balance began to change in 2006. I was working for Burlington Resources, who was now taken over by, who had taken over Canadian Hunter in 2001. We were in the middle of the ConocoPhillips takeover. You're seeing a trend here. I don't move, I just keep getting taken over. I'm interested to see who's big enough to take over ConocoPhillips next. I was getting married in the same month as that takeover, April 2006. And we decided to get right on having a baby. So I was pregnant that same year. So needless to say, my work-life balance was no longer a one-person team. My husband and I quickly realized within that year how our lives were about to change, and in order to achieve work-life balance and sanity, we would need to make some changes. We both worked full-time jobs, which occasionally spilled into the evenings and weekends, like most of us. We had a long commute, and a growing concern that Nolan, even at the age of how many months, wouldn't have a good school in the new community that we were living in, and he would potentially have to be bused for hours on a day to get to school. And we didn't really want to see our little guy at 5 years old sitting on a bus and spending his quality time of life sitting with other children on a bus. So we reassessed our family needs and priorities and decided to make some changes for the better. It's funny, that's the same response I've gotten from most people that have seen this. So, that's just a quick snapshot. I was tempted to change it because the other day we had a Saturday of swim, errands, 2 birthday parties, some family time, a hockey game, and everything else. But I decided this is a typical week. So in 2008, we moved to an older community, which was a bit closer to work for both my husband and I. We found an amazing day home within 2 blocks of our house, which now is no longer considered a day home, but considered a family. And my son has now told Sally that she's not allowed to ever close because the new baby has to go to her. We'll see how that goes. And our community has 2 well-regarded schools within walking distance. My son will never see a bus, at least at this little age. In 2011, I moved within ConocoPhillips again to a new role that gave me the ability to work flexible hours. So as you can see, my hours are, I get to work about 6:15, 6:30, and I stay till about 3:30, 4, depending on traffic and weather. And my husband takes the other shift. And ConocoPhillips was fantastic. As long as you were there during the core hours, and like Ruth said, you got your work done, it doesn't really matter what your hours are, right? And my work still does spill into the evenings and weekends, but that's okay. So as you can see from this slide, my husband takes the morning routines, I take the afternoons, and lucky for us, our day home takes Nolan to and from school daily. My volunteer time now is spent at Nolan's school, his extracurricular activities, and within our community. So they've changed a little bit, but when Nolan gets bigger, he will be participating at the drop-in center, and he will be with Habitat for Humanity. He'll get those same values that were installed in me when I started at Canadian Hunter. As a family, we set our priorities now. Nolan understands that Monday through Friday, Mommy and Daddy both work, and we both really enjoy our careers. And for him, his school is his job right at this point. When we are together in the evenings and weekends, we try to enjoy every minute, and you may find this hard to believe, but we try not to overschedule our lives. So really, he just has swimming and soccer right now, but we try to keep it to 1 or 2, and more achievable, right? Your child doesn't need to be overscheduled. They're already busy enough. We have an amazing support system between grandparents, day home, school, community, and work, who supports me every day. Without them, my message today would be quite different. And as you can see from my busy schedule, it truly does take a village to raise a child. And like any goal or priority set, we need to continually review them and to ensure that they work for everyone in our family. And I think the arrival of baby number 2 in August is going to shake up our schedule a bit. So that's everything. Thank you, guys.
So welcome. I'm going to start off, curiously enough, probably flipping from what you think I'm going to stand up and talk about, and tell you what I'd like to talk about. And I'll start with that by telling you a little bit about the YWCA. We are not the YMCA. And I love the YMCA. In fact, my grandfather was the executive director of the YMCA in the late 60s and 70s here. Weird how life happens. And Helen, who's the CEO there, is a friend of mine, and they do some fantastic work in terms of young people and working in the community. So they're a great organization, primarily focused on health and wellness. The YWCA, on the flip side, is actually a very small part of what we do is our fitness piece, although it's a big piece of our building right now, and I might have a minute to talk about that. Really what the YWCA is all about is helping women who are vulnerable, so vulnerable women and their families in this community. So we have an organization that is around 350 employees. We operate a women's shelter in Inglewood. We operate 2 child care centers, one on our main facility downtown, one at Bow Valley College, which is a great partner of ours. We do language training for new Canadians, Canadian employment skills training, and we have community housing for homeless women, both in the community and also in what we call Mary Dover House on our building. So it's very different than I think what people think that we do. So I want to start there because what I'm not going to do is lecture you about getting to the gym and working out and how important that is. I personally do like doing that. Hot yoga is kind of my thing, but I think to your point, it's really about what Ruth had talked about, what's important and what is meaningful for you, I think, to find that balance. How many of you in this room know the name Gloria Steinem? Well, I'm here to tell you I have the best job in Calgary for all sorts of reasons because of the great team that I have, but every once in a while there's the little perks that come over the top. And this fall, in November, had the great privilege at the YWCA to bring in Gloria Steinem to speak at our 2nd annual Y Whisper Gala. And this is a woman who I think is the epitome of work-life balance in the terms of how she presents herself and how she is. She's 78 years old, and which is amazing. She's beautiful. And if she's had work done, it's the best work ever, because she does not look like she has work done. And just her presence and her grace is amazing, and obviously what she's accomplished in terms of her work around racism and the feminist movement has been exceptional over the years. And we worked her quite hard that day. We had a community roundtable where we had leaders come in and talk about issues in the community around women. We had a media roundtable, and then she had to speak at the dinner. And keeping in mind, again, that's, she's in her late 70s. And I had the privilege of being able to go pick her up at the airport and spend that day with her. And at one point, I did say to her, you're amazing. Like, how is it that you're able to do all of this, and yet you're just so calm and you have presence? What is your balance? What does that look like for you? And she said, you know what? I work on it all the time. It's never something that I feel like I'm good at. And for me, I'd need to find more time to write. And that was her one thing for her. She says, I need to write more, and I love to speak, and I love to listen to people, but that's my piece. So I think that's important to pick up on what is it that gives you that balance. I laughed when I sort of saw the fact or fiction, and when I look back, most of my life has been actually in the corporate sector. And I can tell you that with 3 children, now 23, 18, and almost 16, there are cloudy periods. And I was giggling when you were talking, Rochelle, about child number 2. That child's gonna rock your world. I'm here to tell you. Because you know what? It is twice the work. It's kind of like one gets to be my kids were about 4.5 years apart, the first 2, and it's like, oh, piece of cake. But great fun. And then keep going, because they start taking care of themselves. So I highly encourage. I should have had like 4 or 5 or 6, I think, at the end of the day. The whole fact and fiction about whether or not you can have work-life balance, I think, came back to me around something that I've learned, and that is, I believe you can have it all. You can't have it all at the same time, and it won't all be perfect. And for me, the moment that I realized that I can have it all, but maybe just not today, and that means that it won't always be perfect, and letting that go really, really helped me. So 2 other things, and then I'm hoping we get to do some questions possibly that I just would like to bring to your attention. And that is, at the YWCA, working with the women that we work with, it was really important for us to find out what their needs are. And so we talk about assisting vulnerable women, and we talk about taking them from a place of surviving to thriving, which is probably really thematic in this room, right? We get on this treadmill of, yep, we're surviving, and then you have to take a step back and go, but really, are you thriving? And we commissioned a report, and a lot of it had to do with going out and looking at research that already exists, and then doing a large number of focus groups with the women that we serve. And out of that came the report, Surviving to Thriving, Assessing the Needs of Vulnerable Women. And I bring this to your attention because when you talk about this community in particular in Calgary, really what we learned in here, I'll bet everyone can relate to. And it doesn't matter if you're a vulnerable woman, which we define in our organization as experiencing one of 3 things: poverty, family violence, or isolation. So there's many ways you can look at vulnerable. For our organization, that's how we've chosen to define it. And when you looked at this report, it's not dissimilar to what we find in this community. So the 3 topics that came up over and over again, one was transportation. And so if you're a woman who is challenged with one of those 3 topics, transportation is an issue. And how many of us have totally stressed out, sitting in traffic, waiting for a bus or whatever? It is an issue in the city that really leads to that work-life balance and when you have to do that. The second piece was around childcare. And so for those of you who are parents or thinking about it, it is a huge issue. And I can tell you the most stressful moments of my career was always around childcare and going back to work and finding that and dealing with that. And when you find it, it's fantastic. And in fact, the YMCA is where my oldest went, and he thrived there. I loved it. Those were some of the best years. Actually, that's when I was at Canadian Airlines and had the fun of working alongside Peter Wallace. And but it's an ongoing issue. It's a stress factor. And so imagine now if you're a woman who is maybe making minimum wage or holding down 2 jobs, the child care piece is gigantic, not just for their safety, but what tugs at the heartstrings for any parent. That's not limited at all to women. And the third piece is around affordable housing. And so in this city, that continues to be a gigantic challenge. A single bedroom apartment, probably you know, in this town is well into $900. And that's just simply not possible at the end of the day if you're making minimum wage. You can't do that. So those were the 3 topics, and I bring that up because even affordable housing may mean that you have to be, if you want a house on the outskirts of, some of the outskirts of town, well then transportation becomes an issue. So I just wanted to bring that to you because if those are issues that you're experiencing, you can imagine if you have these other issues that these women are. And so we're all in it together, I guess, at the end of the day. We all share that, and I think there's tremendous power as women to gather and be able to advocate for some changes that will help that. And in particular, the YWCA is very much about advocating and working with government to look for solutions around that. And I think it's wonderful right now, the merging of Alberta Health Services and what I've seen under Redford's government and the conversations I've had with her and Minister Hancock. I'm one of those people who's very hopeful. I think we have a window right now to make some change that way. And I would say to you in this room that a lot of that is driving the change of the workplace. So I actually started out in the oil patch way back in the early 80s. It was the child labor laws were different then. That's why I could. And that's it. And everybody wanted to work at Canadian Hunter. So when you said that, it was like, that makes sense. And I've had the privilege of being able to do a few initiatives with Jim Gray, the founder of Canadian Hunter, over the years. You know, it starts with he walked the talk. He believed in that. He was at the YM, swimming laps. It wasn't just something he told you to do, he actually did it. And that was leadership. And, you know, they probably had the lowest turnover in Calgary in the oil patch in those days and during that boom. And it was because everybody wanted to work there for what that stood for. And so I would say to you, too, is in your roles and in your workplace and as you move around, that's something to advocate for. And I think we're lucky in this town because we have like a 4.3% unemployment rate that sometimes you can actually push for that. But I think it's really important that as women that we make that stand, and as men, that there needs to be some balance that way and put that into perspective. And you know, it's like voters. You're employees. You actually do have a voice, and that voice matters. So I would encourage you to do that. That's really all I had to say, except for one quick little plug, is supply chain management people and how important you are in you know, the corporate sector, but in the voluntary sector. Having experienced supply chain management when I was 9 years at TransAlta, I came to the YWCA, and this is my full circle in terms of the facility we have now. The building was built about 43 years ago when fitness centers were YMs and YWs. Very different. You didn't have Fit for Life, and you didn't have all of these World Health, and you didn't have every new building that went up had a fitness center. So it's really changed the dynamic of when the YWCA was built. And so we've gotten smaller over the years, quite frankly, as we've focused more on what we believe is our mission, which is assisting women who are vulnerable in their families. But as a result of that, we've had to make some changes because things aren't paying for themselves anymore. And I got my first day in December 2010, got a little tour of the facility, and they walked me into what was the swimming pool. So 2 years ago, the swimming pool closed because it was like a private pool for about 3 people. They were pissed when we closed it, but it wasn't paying for itself. So the leadership at the time decided that was prudent because couldn't afford to keep this. And unfortunately, that pool became one big storage cupboard over the years. You know, it's like that extra bedroom at home, and you think, oh, I'll have that. And suddenly one day it's up full to the brim. That's what had happened to the pool. And it was stark and terrifying because people who'd made donations and wasn't sure where to go, it had ended up in the pool or left over. So you walked in and there was this huge pool filled with crap at the end of the day. And so we actually had to, clear out the pool and get on top of that. And as we sort of looked through, how did we get there? It's because we don't have a supply chain management program at the YWCA, which sounds crazy. And when I said, you guys, we need a supply chain management plan, That's what we need here, because we have people who donate stuff and they drop it off at the shelter and they drop it off downtown and they drop it off here and they bring stuff and we don't know what to ask for and we need beds and they might have given that, but somebody's gone and bought them, and it's ridiculous. And so I thought that's what we need, thankfully, after being in the corporate sector, and I picked up the phone and called my good friend Peter Wallace and said, I need a highly skilled volunteer who will do this for me for free. And he said, let me take that away. And as a result of that, grabbed some excellent volunteers who have put together a supply chain management plan for us and have had great fun, according to them, doing it because it's kind of what they get to do, only this is for the YWCA. So I think there also, my plug for you is there's a whole world out there in terms of the charitable and not-for-profit sector that could really use your help, paid or unpaid, that would be very grateful at it because we suck at it and we really need that help. So we have big hearts, but maybe not big minds around that. So encourage you to look at that and thank you.
Okay, I'll just do a really, she is taller than me. I'll just do a really quick recap. I do really appreciate the diversity of what you guys brought to the table. One of the things, a few things that really struck out, and I think everybody would agree, in terms of taking your decision, finding what your priority is. We can all sit here and have somebody define a priority in terms of work-life balance, but don't be misled, it's yours, and don't let anyone dictate it. Laughter is the medicine of life, and if you don't laugh, the next thing is crying, and it's not worth it. And one of the last questions that came out of Sue is, we are in a market where we can define the opportunities we have in our companies, and you don't have to threaten it, but if you can share the results from some of these women and in your organizations, that's a great opportunity. And one of the names, and I saw Gloria, fantastic event. And what I thought was interesting is that you see Gloria Steinem, and she has a cause in her conversations when you see her on TV or on a podium. And she was very casual, very calm, and very personable. She talked about her life. It wasn't about her cause, and you could see her causes from her personality. It was just remarkable. Very relaxed. It was just a remarkable experience. On that note, there was an article, and I have to use my cell phone, sorry, because I can't remember the name. There is an article that was in The Atlantic. It caused quite a bit of controversy, and I don't know if very many women had read this. And it was written by, come on phone, oh, these phones. Anne-Marie Slater. She was the State Department's foreign policy for Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And she wrote an article, Why Women Still Can't Have It All. The irony is that because she chose not to keep the job, people assumed she couldn't handle it. What the reason was, she checked her priorities. Her decision was her priorities, not the job. And I think that's what we as women need to really recognize. So we're going to start off with giving these women a mic, and then I will point to people to get questions and answers. You guys have questions. Come.
Sorry, what's the role of the organization on helping work-life balance?
Pardon me?
What's the role of the organization on helping work-life balance for individuals?
I think it's a conversation. I mean, even in my industry, which is very non-traditional, I think they would have it too.
I think I can talk on my behalf on that, right? But we are very lucky here, actually, in Canada. We are very lucky here in Calgary. We have great programs, particularly at ConocoPhillips, we have great programs. Companies usually give you a Friday off or some flex days, a little more time, some flexibility on your time, like Rochelle was mentioning. If you need to leave earlier, maybe you can get there earlier. So there are a lot of plans. There are also plans focused on health, different kind of plans. There are companies with fitness facilities. There are other companies that have plans to help your family and support family so that people can get to feel better if they have problems. Even hotlines, right? You can call on the phone, and ConocoPhillips does have that. So there are a lot of programs that companies implement, and we can completely take advantage of them. The thing is, we do need to use them, right? That is one of the things. And only the programs that the companies are implementing, they are not enough. We have to take action ourselves.
On that note, do you guys have any suggestions on how to, for people here whose organizations don't have them, how to engage them to consider them?
You mean for organizations that are here and still don't have them?
An established work-life balance program.
Yeah, I would say that talk to your employers and mention which the requirements and your needs are, and how your needs affect work also, because that reflects at work. I used to work for one company that didn't have a lot of programs in place, and they implemented a lot of programs in the last 5 years. I was not there anymore, but that was because employees were pushing for that. And it's not pushing like having strikes, right? It's pushing, it's saying what you really need, and trying to be reasonable, and trying to mention the needs and how that will affect the company at the end.
You know, I'm going to jump in there because I have found over the years, and this is my thing with employees even, if you come to me with a problem, come to me with the solution or an idea of the solution as well. So my approach, I guess, would be, I mean, businesses are there to make money. That's kind of what it is. And so for me, I'd be tempted to take a look at things like productivity, or what are the issues that are holding your company back, or what are things that need tweaking, and draw the line and sort of state your case even. I mean, I'm talking maybe a lot of work, but if it's a high turnover rate, or if it's find a way to state your case in business-like terms. We'd all love to think that everybody's got a big heart and they just want to do it because it's the nice thing to do. But I think at the end of the day, you have to be able to show that there is an incremental value to the organization for whatever might be the issue around that. Or maybe it's they need more women, and maybe that's a way to attract more women, or more diversity. So I think that's where I'd start.
Linda?
Sue, maybe there are programs already in place, but we're here because we have an issue around filling a talent and a labor issue. You serve young women and women who are vulnerable. Are you working with any of our educator providers? Can we work together to give the women that you serve more skill and reduce poverty and help them move from where they are?
Thank you. Yes, we are. I mean, we have many great partners in the community, not near as many as we want to have. Bow Valley College we run their child care center there, so there are a number of initiatives that we do together. And I would leap onto that to say that part of what we've identified in the women that we serve is that there is a gap between where they are now and being successful in a lot of the post-secondary institutions that are identified here. And so what we are actually currently doing is building a program, a skills program, that would get them from there to there. So some very core competencies that these women don't have in terms of communication skills and being able to be successful at post-secondary education. So I think that there's real opportunity to work with those organizations so that when these women are there, that we're preparing them for that, but when they do get there, that there's mentors and others that can help ensure they're successful once they're there, because they do have additional challenges than what we might classify as your typical student. So the answer to that is looking forward to figuring that out together, because I think there is huge opportunity.
There's a lot of schools here you can talk to. Any other questions? Wow, there's a lot of work-life balance here. Yes.
Do you think the fact that we have 6 premiers that are female now will make any difference to work-life balance?
Am I?
They had I forget what it's called, but the advocacy program that you'd have so many black people or whatever, would they advocate the fact that you have to have so many? Legislative, yeah.
You know what? I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful in terms of, and I think it's wonderful. I mean, the biggest provinces in Canada now have women leading them. How cool! That's just cool. And one of the big things in terms of women, it's about equity. It's not women taking over the world, and that's the big misnomer, right? It's just that balance. Work-life balance is also gender balance. So I'm hopeful. As women, we can be our own worst critics, though. So I think it's going to be, there's some toughness because we want to overextend. We have this own innate need to prove ourselves. So I hope that doesn't sort of go the other way. And I do think that people are harsh on women leaders because it's new, people and media. So I think that's going to be challenging, but I'm hopeful that will, because it will start to create balance around that, and balance around board tables, and balance around ministers and all of that. So,
Actually, I agree. No, I completely agree. Yeah, it's. I would like to repeat the message. Like it's always, even if that goes that way, it's still about us, right? So I think we are going to have the opportunity, and it will push things on the right direction. And we are seeing that, right? But at the end, it's still up to, it comes back, right? It's up to us.
Any other questions? Right. Thank you guys very much, and I really appreciate the conversation and the ideas. I think they were very, very enlightening. Thank you.